Today, you'll learn how trauma actually impacts the brain and the nervous system, why some of what you've heard just regulates what is wrong, and which therapeutic approaches can create long-lasting change by working with the subconscious. Now, stay tuned to the end for 5 things that you can start with this week. Now, I want you to remember, if this helps, follow the advisor with Stacey Chillemi on Apple or Spotify, or subscribe on YouTube at Stacey Chillemi Advisor. It helps more people get real tools. Now, my guest today is Michelle Smith. She's amazing. She is a trauma-informed therapist who helps people heal at the nervous system level. And this is something that really excites me because I love this topic. So, Michelle, welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you here. Really excited because you are a psychotherapist and I just adore psychotherapists. I love how you guys go into the subconscious, like we were talking before, you bring it to the surface and then you work through those feelings with your patients and really get some amazing outcomes. Now, one question I want to ask you is in plain English, what is trauma and what is not trauma? Because so many people, have that question, like we were talking about earlier before the show. Some people you say, "Oh, that's not trauma, that's nothing," and then some people it could be a very traumatic event in their lives. So, how do you define that?
Well, Stacey, thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful to be here. I think this is such an important question. What is trauma? And I'll start with what is not trauma, because I think that a lot of people have misunderstandings around this, right? There's a lot of myths that for me to be able to experience trauma, I've had to go through these really stressful events. And sometimes it does look like that, right? If you've experienced, assault or abuse, of course that you may have experience with trauma. One of the things that's important to note about trauma is the event itself really doesn't matter to determine if you are experiencing trauma. For example, you and I could be sitting here experiencing the same thing, and one of us can leave with a trauma response and the other one cannot. And so, really, what matters when we're assessing trauma is how did your body and your nervous system respond to that event? When that memory is kind of stored, is it stored in the area of the brain where these other healthy memories are? Or does it kind of get flagged by your brain, almost like, okay, this one is dangerous. And so what happens is it doesn't store in the same area, it stores in this fear-based center of the brain versus the hippocampus. And that creates these patterns that people get very frustrated about. Maybe they recognize certain patterns or behaviors or people, places, things that feel similar to the trauma. And then kind of I talk about this volcano eruption, this lack of control, behavioral response or emotional response. If you're recognizing that, you may be experiencing trauma. And so that is kind of the best way to explain it is it's more about the way you respond versus the actual event that determines it, if that makes sense, Stacey.
Oh, it makes total sense because there's so many times where I've talked to people about this and they totally agree. Sometimes you could say something to somebody and it's just like a phrase. There's nothing wrong with what they said, and that person will snap and just like go off like on a little bit of a tangent. And you're like, what I say, what I do, and to me that sounds like they might have had trauma and maybe it's stored in their subconscious. Could that be true?
Absolutely, especially when you feel like these almost happen in a snap of a finger, right? It almost feels like I can't interrupt that cycle. I get frustrated. A lot of the times, trauma responses have a lot of shame impacted because perhaps that's the way that you had to survive or keep safe in that past instant. What your brain doesn't know is that you're not re experiencing that. So when you have those kind of trauma responses, your brain actually thinks that you are back in that moment and is trying to do what it can to protect you. And so, what we have to do with the subconscious work is we have to remind the brain, hey, the past is not present. We have to do this reprocessing, and then we can have a less intense response, right?
Hmm. I love that. Now, how does trauma actually show up in the brain and in the nervous system? Like, what changes?
So much can change. So, when we talk about trauma, a lot of it is impacting your sense of safety and your sense of self, right? So, your nervous system kind of creates these guards, these protective guards, and it looks different in a lot of different people, but it may kind of present as struggling to relax or feeling really hyper vigilant or struggling with irritability that feels incredibly intense and not event specific. So, when we talk about kind of the nervous system, It's always trying to do its job. A lot of the times we get mad at our bodies because we're like, why am I responding this way? But a lot of the times the nervous system has learned these responses because it's trying to protect you from what feels like a direct threat, whereas really you're just recalling a memory. So it can look a lot of different ways, but really what it means is that that safety in your body and your mind have been kind of taken away. And that's one of the first steps of trauma recovery is reestablishing that safety, reestablishing that stabilization so that we can go deeper and do that rewiring in the 90% of the brain that kind of stores that subconscious mind, right?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Now, what are a few myths that you hear all the time, like just get over it, or it wasn't that big, and don't worry about it, or that we need to retire today.
Oh my gosh, all of those, right? That, nobody can understand you are, I always talk about you're the expert on yourself. And so you're the only one who knows what you experienced, who knows why this is important or meaningful. People who are dismissive of that maybe they haven't understood, or maybe they are also blocking some of their own traumatic experiences because that's a protector part of their own to stay in this, it's not a big deal mindset. So all of those things can be very damaging because then I'm questioning my own self and I'm questioning, am I crazy? Is there something wrong with me? Why am I responding this way? Everybody's saying just get over it. It's not that easy when something is stored that deep in the brain. We have to, just like a deep wound, we have to open that back up. We have to clean up the wound. We have to, sew and get into the crevices of that. And so it's a process, right? It's not just something that you could stick a band-aid on and say, you're all better, right?
Right. Yeah, no, for sure. There's so many times where you hear people say, "Oh, just get over it," and then sometimes I would talk to people and I would see, think to myself, they're saying just get over it, but I know for a fact that they've been through similar situations in the past, and I feel like you said, sometimes they just say get over it so they don't have to deal with their own emotions that they've suppressed in their subconscious.
Absolutely. I always talk about, every relationship in your life is a mirror. And so if somebody is triggering to you, why? Be curious about that. What is that triggering? Is there an area that's unhealed? Is that bringing up kind of an old response? Or what about that is coming because that's giving you important data, right? So, we tend to take that information and really personalize it, but a lot of the times it's helpful evidence. It's something that can kind of grow and be curious, and that may lead us to targets or areas that we need to kind of dive back into and reprocess. So the
Yeah.
curiosity is such a great protective factor. If you can look at things from a curious perspective instead of a critical one, I talk a lot
Yeah.
with my clients about that. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Now, for the person listening who thinks maybe I'm just anxious, what are the signals that it could be unprocessed trauma instead?
That's a great question. So, with anxiety, a lot of the times it is focused on maybe perhaps a specific area, or maybe it's something that comes up in a certain season of life or a certain circumstance. So, I get anxious when I have to talk to my boss about, my performance, what have you. When I have trauma, a lot of the times it colors all of kind of my life. It feels like it's become kind of this really cloak that I wear. And it feels like it's deeply rooted. So, it's not something where perhaps regular coping skills may help, but a lot of the times that behavior pattern doesn't change over time. So if you're recognizing, hey, I'm using these skills and I'm feeling a little bit better, but I'm still feeling this same pattern coming around all the time and it feels very uncontrolled. It feels like this volcano eruption. Perhaps
Yeah.
there is trauma attached to it. And anxiety, a lot of the times, is a symptom of that trauma response. So it can get very messy and confusing trying to figure that out on your own.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Now, everyone says regulate your nervous system. What does that actually mean?
Great question. Our nervous system consists of, the brain and the spinal cord, and it governs our entire body and our mind and so many areas, right? So when your nervous system is dysregulated, essentially what we're saying is you're outside of your window of tolerance. And that
Mhm.
means that I'm going to be maybe perhaps more reactive or triggered, or stress is going to impact me more. So when we talk about regulating our nervous system, it really means working with the mind and body together, right? How are you treating yourself yourself? How are you creating safety in your body every single day, right? Safety is something that you have to create. And so what creates that for you? It might be having a routine, taking care of yourself, exercising, focusing on mindfulness and meditation. We really need to figure out what that looks like for every single client. And there's a lot of different strategies and resources that I'll provide for a client in the beginning of a treatment process that can allow them to do that. Simple things like grounding, self hypnosis. I have a website, I have a newsletter that clients can sign up for free on my website where you can get a 20-minute self hypnosis that just allows you to kind of turn down intensity. So things like that, right? Being able to add that to your routine. And then over time, it kind of becomes a habit. It becomes part of what you do every day, if that makes sense.
Oh, it totally makes sense. Now, when someone is activated, like racing heart or shallow breath and can't focus, what's your 2-minute reset that they could try right now?
Oh, that's a great question. So first, put your feet on the floor, kind of move your toes around in your socks, just kind of shake them out, feel your feet grounded to the floor. And I always like to say, take a deep breath in through your feet. So bringing up the breath from top of the feet, up the chins, up the knees, all the way, holding at the top of the head, and then releasing slowly, noticing kind of the escalation and de-escalation in the body. So just really putting yourself in the present moment. Your
Mhm.
breath is a great anchor for that. You can't be breathing in the past or in the future. So if you can
Right.
connect to your breath, that's a great way to tell your body life is happening here. Life is now, right?
Because I see so many people live in the past and so many people worry about the future, and you can't change the past and you don't know what the future holds. So we can't predict our future. So I always say, why worry about it? And my husband or anybody will be like, oh, yeah, it's really easy to do. And I'm not saying it's not, it's difficult, it's
Right.
difficult. Because I do it myself. How many times have you put yourself in your brain and you're panning out the scenario before it even happens, and it usually doesn't even happen that
Yeah.
way. I've done that many times, and I can feel my cortisol level going up. And why? Why did I do it? There was no
Right.
reason to. And then with the past, I can't change the past. I just can just work on the healing process and move forward. So really, I love the breathing exercises. Just focus on that makes you focus on the present, because that's really all we have at that moment, and that's where we can actually kind of pivot and try to help ourselves, kind of go in the direction we want to go in.
Absolutely. And we tend to do that because perhaps there's an emotional need that's being unmet. So I always ask my clients to be curious, were you seeking control? Were you feeling out of control? Were you feeling overwhelmed? Like why focus on the future right now? A lot of the times it's a means of trying to create what I call a false sense of safety. It's like if I can know what's happening, if I can prepare, if I can do all the things, I feel like my body's safe. But real
Yeah,
safety doesn't come from outside circumstances. It comes from the practices that you build internally. And so I
right,
always talk to clients about that and build a curiosity around, okay, how does that integrate and how do we work with that response, right?
right. I love that. Now, what are two lifestyle stressors like sleep and scrolling and caffeine and isolation that keeps the nervous system on high alert?
Oh, these are great questions. So, artificial dopamine, I think, is a major area that we have, intensified based on technology and our phones and all of the access that we have. And so
Yeah,
that creates challenges with a lot of those areas, sleep, just healthy lifestyle in general. And so I always
yeah,
talk to clients, and for folks, women especially, we need more oxytocin. So we need more of the pleasure hormone, the hormone that makes us feel good, and so we want to be able to increase natural dopamine, natural oxytocin. So what are you doing for that, especially in the winter months? I'm talking to a lot of my clients about how are you getting sunlight? How are you moving your body? How are you not isolating? Because your automatic response is to want to get in bed, curl up, and not get out of the bed, right? So I have to
yeah,
practice that opposite action where it's like, okay, what's going to allow me to feel that connection? It may be calling a friend. It might be sitting in front of your windowsill if you can't get outside for 20 minutes while the sun rises. It might be
yeah,
focusing on moving your body for 10 minutes every day, eating, foods and high protein, just being intentional about how am I treating my body with love and kindness. And that
yeah.
helps with that nervous system regulation, Stacey.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Now, what's one thing, that people, well-meaning friends and families say that actually doesn't help someone with trauma? Because, especially with family and also friends too that really care about you. Sometimes I see it all the time and sometimes I'm a victim of doing it myself. You give your opinion when your opinion is not really rendered. Like I've learned, it took me like 40 something years to learn, but it was like I learned that, if someone doesn't ask for your opinion, then they really don't want your opinion. And so you can't really bring a horse to drink water, like, you can only, what is it? You only can bring a horse to water, but you can't make it drink it. So it's
Correct.
like, and so a lot of times people don't really want to hear your opinion, but we have a lot of friends and family members who tend to give it anyway. And, so, what's one thing that, can help someone with, doesn't really help someone with trauma that, people can try to stay away from and not do and not say.
I think exactly that, right? Trying to give advice or saying, when I went through this or making it about themselves. I think it's a normal response because we are social beings. We want to make connections. And when you say you experience that, I say, "Oh, I remember when I experienced that," right? But if someone's in a tough space, a lot of the times what they need is to be understood, to be heard, to be acknowledged and say, "Stacey, wow, it looks like you're going through such a tough time right now. I hear you're really struggling. I'm curious, what do you need from me right now? Would it be helpful to just vent? Would it be helpful for me to share a piece of advice? Or do you just need a hug right now? Or do you want to go on a walk? Or what would help you, right? Because that also triggers that person to be curious about what is that need in that moment. So instead of jumping straight to fixing, sometimes, Brene Brown has a good saying of crawling in that hole of discomfort with that person and sitting and saying, "Hey, it's dark down here. It doesn't feel good. I get that, but I'm here with you," right? So that's a better response. And then we can build trust in those relationships in that way.
I agree with you totally. That's a great response. And I especially like, I remember, I had an aunt one time and she was getting so annoyed with somebody because that person kept, turning the conversation around and making it about them. And she says, all I want is somebody just to listen. I just need to share and just have someone to listen. I think a lot of times people just need that support. They don't want you to say anything. They don't want you to give your input. They don't want your opinion. Sometimes just being an extra ear is all, that person needs, and maybe a hug.
Yeah. And when we jump straight to conclusions, I think we also say that there's something wrong. And we have to think about the subconscious impact of everything that we do, everything we don't do, everything we say. This is something that I think about a lot in the work that I do. But I think
Yeah.
about when I say that to you, am I telling you that there's something inherently wrong with being in that space, right? Because there's not. Sometimes we need to be sitting in discomfort. This is a part of the human experience is being able to feel both sides of the coin, the joy, the sorrow, the depression, the sadness, all of the things, right? They all are valuable and some feel better than others, right? But we also
Right.
don't want to send this message to the subconscious that for some reason discomfort is something that number one, I can't handle or that I should hide and try to fix so quickly.
Yeah. Oh, that's so true. Now, how can your partner or your parents support sometimes healing without trying to fix them?
I think, building that real trusting, safe relationship, right? And really asking them what they need. And sometimes it might just be a check-in, "Hey, I've been thinking about you," or "Hey, I saw this funny video and it made me think of you," right? Not necessarily putting pressure on a response or, saying, "What can I do for you this week? Can I send you some paper plates if you're feeling struggling and you can't wash your dishes? Okay, let me
Yeah.
Amazon you some paper plates and just make it easier for you." Or what would you need in those moments, right? Sometimes it's
Right.
so hard to ask for help whenever we're in such a, depressed or traumatic response that we feel like we don't have the energy to do that. And so sometimes somebody just saying, "Hey, the door's open. If you need this, I'm here." That really
Yeah.
allows the other person to come and say, "You know what? That would be great. Thank you so much for helping."
I think that's a great response. And so many times I hear people say that, they're in a traumatic event and they don't want to ask for help because they feel like they're an inconvenience. And how many times I've heard that over and over and over again. And, what do you say to that?
What I say is there's probably a deeper subconscious tie a lot of the times. If I feel like I'm struggling to ask for help, you may have a belief system that's deeper, that's I'm a burden, or I'm inadequate, or I'm not worthy of receiving help. So that's something to work on in your therapy work. And at the same time, practice gradual exposure and being able to put deposits in. Hey, I did that. It was hard, but I did it and it was safe is important.
Yeah.
So practice wherever it feels like it's not a 10 out of 10 of intensity. It might be
Yeah.
asking the barista, can you give me an extra straw? Or something small that may bring up a little bit of intensity, but then you're able to put a positive deposit in. I did it and it was safe. And so we
Right.
have to kind of balance both of these things. The past and present are very tied in trauma responses, and we're working in the present. We're also working in the past at the same time to be able to change this response and belief system all at once.
Oh, I love that. Now, what modalities do you love for trauma and the nervous system work, like EMDR, somatic work, parts of breath work, and what do they actually do in the brain?
Absolutely. So I'm a very eclectic therapist. I utilize a lot of those modalities. EMDR for memory processing is very helpful to be able to rewire specific events that were traumatic and change the belief systems. I utilize clinical hypnosis as well to be able to target specific themes or install positive suggestions that are helpful to build the life and the future self that you want. I also
Right.
utilize IFS, which is parts work, understanding the different parts of ourselves, the protective parts, the parts that have had to come out of survival, and being able to build a compassionate lens towards the ways you've had to survive. And
Yeah.
also, somatic work is very helpful. The mind and the body are incredibly connected. I notice that when clients come in with trauma, a lot of the
Yeah.
times they're recognizing a lot of dissociation. And so I don't feel in my body. And so it might be very small, but noticing, okay, how does your body respond here? How can you reconnect? What's happening here, right? Being able to build this better relationship with the mind, body, and spirit. It really is. It's a full encompassing process of healing with trauma.
Yeah. Oh, I love that answer. Now, how does someone know that they're ready for deeper work versus staying with skills and education for a while?
That's a good question. I think, start where you are, right? You want to meet yourself where you are. And if you're working in a therapeutic setting, that's something that you're going to do collaboratively with a therapist. And so I'm going to be
Right.
assessing as we're working, and I'm going to say, how are you maintaining stabilization? It doesn't mean that you don't have circumstances that get you out of that window of tolerance, but you feel
Yeah.
confident that when it does, hey, I've got I have this toolbox and there's a lot of tools in it. And, if one tool doesn't work, I feel like I could pull out the wrench or pull out the hammer or what have you. So we build those. A lot of times that's the first stage of therapy with trauma is we're building those resources. We're finding what works. We're helping the client feel autonomous over that. And then once we have those in place, then we can dive into the deeper subconscious work, which might be memory processing or, doing some hypnosis around targeted themes that you're struggling with or parts work. And so that we know that you're going to be able to be safe to go to those depths of subconscious, and that's something that we do together. So you just really getting started a lot of times is the hardest part. So don't feel like you have to have it all together to get started because that's my job to help you.
I love that. What does progress really look like? Like fewer triggers, faster recovery, better choices?
Oh my gosh, good question. A lot of clients will feel you're feeling more. When you're getting better, you're feeling more. You've been in the shutdown mode a lot of the times. So maybe you felt very numb. And then as you start healing, you start noticing more things. And that can be distressing because it's like, wait, none of this stuff felt like it mattered before. And now I'm feeling every single thing. And I don't know how I like that. I'm not very happy with that, Michelle. And so we really
Yeah,
have to recognize that sometimes it feels more intense at first because
yeah,
all of this stuff that's been kind of pushed into the cobwebs in the corners of your brain is starting to come out. You're building the safety, and your brain's like, oh, what about this? Don't forget about here you go, Stacey. This is all this stuff because now you're ready
yeah,
for this. You're taking care of yourself. You're eating when you're hungry. You're drinking when you're thirsty. You're going to the bathroom when you have to. So you're signaling to your nervous system, I'm ready for that emotional work. And that means that I'm going to start feeling more. And so sometimes it's more intense at first because you're experiencing more. Over time, that becomes more normalized. But a lot of the times, clients will note, wow, this feels a lot. This feels intense. I feel like they turned up the volume on my experiences overnight.
yeah,
And that does mean that you're getting better, even if in the moment it feels a little icky.
yeah. I feel like it's always hard. Like it's like you feel like in the beginning it's really tough, and then and even going over the hump is really hard. But if you keep working at it and you stay consistent, you're gonna get to the rainbow. And then once you're at the rainbow, life just feels great. It's like all those things have gone away. Like they just like it's like putting it on a dove and letting it fly, and it's just you feel like a totally new person. And then, I agree with you. You're able to feel again, because when you repress emotion and everything's stuffed in your subconscious, you start to feel numb, I think. That's my opinion, and you start to like not really feel your emotions because you're so overwhelmed with emotions that you don't even know how you feel anymore. Do you think that's true?
Absolutely. Oh, it's absolutely true. And a lot of the times that's that protection mechanism, right? The body's saying, hey, you're not taking care of your basic needs. When you're not going, for example, going to the bathroom when you have to, and I'm a critical component of this because a lot of times I'll have things back to back and I have to practice my own, right? So
Yeah,
I'm telling myself I don't have time. I'm really telling myself that I'm not safe enough to relieve a basic human need. And so how does that trickle into other things, right? I have to
yeah,
be willing to experience discomfort, sadness, all of these things, take care of my basic needs to be able to also experience joy and happiness. And the other side of the coin, they're two of the same. And so,
yeah,
really being able to feel is it's a privilege. It's something that we want to change our belief systems around. And when you talk about that dove, that's something that I talk to my clients about a lot. When you feel like a belief system has shifted, you wake up and maybe nothing in your life has changed, but everything has changed because you have changed. So the way you're perceiving things change, the way you're acting is changing, the way you're thinking is changing, and it feels like it unlocks this like something that you knew you needed, but you didn't know how to get there, you know?
yeah. I agree. Yes, 100%. Now, for people who have tried therapy before and didn't feel better, what would you tell them?
I think so. Couple different things. Number one, it can be very discouraging. I've had clients come to me who have said, I didn't want to come here because I felt burned by a therapist, and that can really break trust. And so your rapport with your therapist is so important. It's very important that you feel safe and that you feel heard and that you feel trusted. And a lot of the times that's something that you're going to either get quickly or you're going to feel it's not the match. So that's
Yeah,
frustrating, but you also want to trust your intuition. Trusting your intuition is another way of healing trauma, reconnecting
yeah,
because we tend to disconnect from trauma. So if you feel like your gut saying, hey, this isn't the right fit, go with that. Listen to that. Another thing is make sure that you're meeting with a therapist who has the training and expertise in the area that you need support. So, for
right.
example, talk therapy is great. There's a lot of positives to being heard and being able to talk through, using that conscious mind. My work is focused on the deeper subconscious, the rewiring, the trauma, the things that, keep you up in the middle of the night, right? And so I may not be the therapist for everybody, but
Right.
you also want to make sure that your therapist is trained and ask those questions. I provide free consults on my schedule. I always allow space for that for clients who are interested but don't
Yeah,
know or are questioning to meet with me. So I always say, come and ask me questions. Ask me whatever you
yeah,
feel, and I will do my best to answer so that we can build this safe relationship. So that's
right.
something else is have a free consult, meet with me. Maybe you want to talk, but you don't know exactly where that looks. Let's do that together, right? You don't have to have all the answers to get started,
100%. Yeah, no, 100%. Now, you talk about resilience of humanity. Like, what have you seen in your clients that make you feel hopeful?
So the ability that humans can manage so much discomfort and pain is incredibly hopeful and amazing to recognize that we can go through these challenging experiences in life and come out the other side with a
Yeah,
meaning attached to it and say, you know what? It wasn't fun, but I got through it, and now I have this newfound meaning or perspective, or
yeah,
this looks different to me. And so that's what I see with my clients with resilience is that they're able to say, that's an experience that I had. It's made me who I am. I can look at it from a different perspective. It's absolutely incredible how much we can really experience when it comes to pain and discomfort. And I see
yeah.
that every day with my clients. It's such a privilege to witness that, Stacey. I mean, I do not take that lightly, that in that work I do.
Oh, I agree with you. And I feel like I've gone through the same things where I feel like, wow, I can't believe I've gone through all this in my life. And I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
Everybody has a story. But
Yeah.
there have been a few times where I've looked up in the sky, I'm like, God, listen, if you're trying to make me more resilient, I got it all covered. I said, I don't need any more resilience. I'm good. I'm good. It's like,
Give me a break here. I'll take a time out here. Thank you. Yes.
exactly, exactly. Like I know I'm strong. I don't need any more. Thank you.
Give me a break. Let me catch my breath for a second. I know it can feel a lot like feast or famine, with stressors kind
Yeah.
of piling up. I've been there too.
But it definitely is true. Like people, humans, I got to give them credit. We can hold a lot of pain, a lot of obstacles, emotions caused by those obstacles, and people get through it, and they get up, The majority of people have no problem getting up and going, no matter how many times they've gotten knocked down. And you hear so many positive stories and how people have become better people through the pain and the obstacles they endured. So yeah, it's pretty amazing when it comes to that. It totally is. Totally is. Now, how do we hold both that, something painful has happened and that we can still build a good life?
That is really shifting your belief systems a lot of the times. And that's work that, we have to do in therapy and be understanding, what is to understand your belief systems, I think can be challenging because belief systems may not necessarily be something that you think regularly. So you may not
Yeah.
necessarily think, I'm unlovable, right? That may never be a thought that you ever experience. However, in my life, I may neglect my own self care or disrespect my own boundaries or let people treat me in a way that are sending the message to my subconscious that I am unlovable. And so
Yeah.
part of that is really understanding where is your current belief systems around discomfort, uncertainty, hardship, these big challenges that we go through, and then being
Yeah.
able to provide an antidote, a more adaptive belief, right? It might not
Right.
be, tomorrow, hey, I love myself and I'm the most beautiful pageant person ever, but I can practice, okay, what would it look like if I treated myself with 1% more compassion, or I was kind to myself in the way that I am to my best friend or my mom or somebody I really care about, right? So it's a gradual shift. And as you reprocess those memories, as you start building positive suggestions, you recognize those shifts gradually over time. And then sometimes you wake up and you're like, wow, I'm not doing that anymore. That's when you know a belief system has shifted. And then we can have a party, pull out the party hats.
I love that. I love that because a lot of times you could have a belief, and you don't even realize, like you were saying, I am unlovable. Maybe you've gone through so much that it's hard for you to, maybe you give 50% instead of 100% because you just gone through so much in life that you just don't know how to give your whole self to somebody or, and then, one day, like you said, you come to realizations, you formulate new ideas and then you've gone through things that kind of maybe open the door to a different door and all of a sudden you can give that 100%, instead of that 50%.
Yeah. And it's doable. It happens in your life, I mean, I think sometimes we can get so stuck, but there's always a change. There's always a possibility. And, sometimes we have to scan backwards to look for those things where in the moment it felt like this door was closing and everything was ending, but then I can recognize it opened this next one and it opened the next and led me to here. And so sometimes it's hard to feel that in the moment and that
Yeah.
discomfort and that overwhelm. And, we don't have to make sense of it while we're in it. And I think that that's
Right.
another thing that I teach my clients is just feel through it and then, we can make the meaning afterwards. We don't have to do it all at once.
Right. I agree. I agree. Now, if the world feels heavy right now, what's the one daily practice to stay grounded and useful?
Good question. Any type of mindfulness and meditation or grounding in any capacity, right? I always talk about the first thing that you do when you wake up sets the tone of the day. And so
Yeah.
a lot of us, at least myself included, use our phones to use an alarm, right? So that's the first thing that you're doing, perhaps. And then you turn off your alarm, you're already in blue light. And then the first thing, if you're checking your emails, right? And you're saying, oh my gosh, what do I got going on today? I got such a busy day. And now I'm going and I'm picking up the kids and I'm doing all the things. Interrupting that cycle is vital, right? You want the first thing you do in the morning to be for you. And so
Yeah.
whether that's, doing a couple of deep breaths in the bed and setting an intention and saying, today I will be curious, or today I will, focus on what brings me joy or something like that. Or it might be doing some grounding, some bilateral stimulation, tapping or something of that sort, being able to really connect to the present moment and do
Yeah.
something enjoyable before you jump into your day to day-to-day to-do list, that really sets the tone. And then I'm thinking about that throughout the day, your brain going from subconscious to conscious, that waking, and then conscious to unconscious, that night, very
Yeah.
vital time. So I talk a lot with clients about, hey, what's your morning routine? It doesn't have to be long. It could be 5 minutes. What's your evening routine? Let's really strengthen and bookend that if we can, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Now, if I give you, I'm going to throw like a couple scenarios at you and you tell me like what you think. So,
Yeah.
middle of the night anxiety, what would you do right then?
Oh, good question. If you're tossing and turning too much in bed, you need to get out of bed for a period of time. Bed, you want to associate in your subconscious with restful sleep. And so if you're somebody like me, you don't want to work in bed, you don't want to eat in bed, you want bed to be associated with sleep only. So get
Yeah.
up, get on the couch, and then you can either do some deep breaths. I talk a lot about recalling a positive memory, right? So this will trigger your subconscious brain to recall a moment in time where your body was in a safe, comfortable place. So it may be
Yeah.
walking through that memory in detail. Okay, I got on the bus, I went here, I went to the store, I experienced this, notice the smells, notice the sights, notice the touch, really, really deep in that, right? Um, Something like that can be helpful. Reading or bilateral stimulation can be very helpful. So moving eyes from back and forth, left to right or up and down, that triggers the right and the left brain to calm the nervous system very quickly. So that's why if you ever can open up a book and you get tired, it's because your brain is kind of getting in that space of, okay, time to rest, time to relax. So try those
Yeah.
things if you're struggling. Sleep can be really hard.
When I do want to fall asleep, that's like one of the things I do is I start to read. I pull out a
Yeah.
book, I start to read, and then after like 10, 15 minutes, I start getting really tired. And
Yeah.
it's like, and then it just works all the time.
Yeah, it's because you're triggering your right and your left brain and kind of this pattern, the somatic pattern that's sending a message to the nerves. So we use that in EMDR. It's called bilateral stimulation. So there's a lot of
Mhm.
ways to do that. Reading is a natural one, walking is a natural bilateral stimulation, but you can also tap just gently on your shoulders, or you can do it on your thighs as well, and just sending that message, breathing, sending a calm message to the nervous system, reminding yourself that you're safe too. There's nothing urgent. You know, if you have something urgent, write it down. Okay, Michelle, who's rested, will come to that. I'm going to focus on resting right now, repeating that you're safe. A lot of the times, the brain, when you're up at night, it feels like it's on guard. So it's an evolutionarily response where if you're up
Yeah.
past a certain time, typically like 11 or 12 p.m., your brain feels like you're the one on guard. So, like you were the one protecting the whole village and had to stay up. And so we have to kind of remind the brain, hey, we're good. We can rest. It's safe to rest. There's no bears chasing us right now, you know.
I love that. I love that. Now, holidays, that's it triggers, lots of people and families. What's my pre-event, plan? If I know that I'm going to see my family and I'm getting triggered because okay, Aunt so and so is going to be there and she always says something really stupid that really puts me through the wall, or you have like maybe another relative that is always yapping and talking about other people. And, she thinks that you can't hear her, but everybody in the room can hear her, and you have to see all these people that give you like anxiety, cortisol level goes through the roof, and it's like, how do you prepare for that? Like, what is your plan?
That's a great question. So, Stacey, you're talking my language because right now I'm talking to my clients. We're going to be doing a group around managing stress and holiday triggers because this is a triggering time for a lot of
Yeah,
folks. It's this
a lot.
opposite response where, our bodies want to calm down, we want to rest, we want to hibernate, we want to do what nature does, calm. And then instead we have more on our plate. So we have multiple gatherings, multiple people we have to see. We have all these expectations and responses. So what I'll do in my group a lot of times is I'll talk with clients about creating a coping plan. And that may look like practicing radical acceptance. Okay, I'm going to see Aunt Becky. I know Aunt Becky is difficult. I know that these are these topics that may be difficult. If I have to accept that Aunt Becky is probably going to still be Aunt Becky this year, how do I manage that, right? And that may include some boundaries. So we might say, okay, I'm going to set a time limit. I'm going to be here for this time. And, I'm really going to be focusing on my breath during this time. And I'm going to use this grounding skill. And I'm going to have this coping statement. If Aunt Becky brings up political disagreements, then I'm I'm going to say, thanks so much for sharing that. Can you tell me about your cats? Or here's my one response, right? That's my response that
Yeah.
I'm going to say. That's kind of be a broken record response if needed. So we do this in my group where I'm helping them understand difficult stressors. I'm having them create a coping plan. And it's important to be able to have that ahead of time because, you feel like you're really kind of going in without a life jacket. If not, you can feel flooded emotionally in those holiday stressors.
For sure, people, talk about holidays, they celebrate holidays and they love holidays, but holidays for many people are stress triggers. And lots of people always talk about, all the stresses, whether it's for the preparation, whether it's dealing with family, whether it's both, it's actually a really stressful time. And then it also brings back memories of loved ones, that have passed, and it's, so it's a good thing, but yet it could be very stressful for many, which it
Oh,
is. You hear it all the time.
absolutely. And I always talk to my trauma clients about this is the time where trauma responses are going to be on high alert. Your body's going to recognize, the familiarity of the holiday season. Everything feels this way. And these are the patterns and these are the things that we do. And so your body is going to know, your body keeps score of those things. And so we want to be prepared. It can really creep up on you if you're not thinking about your holiday coping plan. And so that's why I provide these groups. Typically, I do groups in November and December to support and to talk about those things, to talk about seasonal affective grief, trauma responses, coping plans for difficult conversations. So, yeah, if you're somebody who's struggling with that, I would love to have them join my group and we can talk about that in a safe, collaborative environment together.
I love that. How could someone get involved and sign up for your group?
Yeah. So you can just visit my website, www.michellesmithlmhc.com. From there, I have the group on there. You can, right now we're getting interest lists. So you can kind of indicate what times would work best for you. And that way I can kind of start those groups. I plan to do a couple in November, a couple in December. If you're interested in a free consult, that's also where you can sign up for a free consult with me, schedule a time, and we can chat about your therapeutic needs more so.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Now, are there any other like services that we didn't mention that you provide also?
So I provide, we talked about individual therapy, but I also provide couples therapy. I do provide other types of group therapy, so trauma-focused group therapies, relationship loss group therapy, grief therapy, etc. I also do intensive psychotherapies. So you might be somebody who doing weekly, week-to-week therapy is difficult. Your schedule may be difficult. And so intensive therapy is kind of fast and furious, accelerated rates of getting healed quickly. And so we can kind of carve out, a weekend and really target a specific area of your trauma, or, maybe a couple needs focus on this area, co-parenting. And so we can schedule kind of blocks of time sequenced in your schedule and kind of really get some hard work done quickly. So if you're somebody
Wow.
like that, you may really want to look into intensive therapy, but I do have a lot of different options on my website that may work for you.
I love that. Now, Michelle, listeners were promised 5 concrete actions. Would you share those 5 things that they can do, this week to support their nervous system and their healing?
Yeah. First, I would say notice your basic needs. You're a plant. So, when are you hungry? Eat something. When you're thirsty, drink water. When you have to go to the bathroom, and notice how much you tend to ignore those cues. So, that's number
Yeah.
one. Number two is focus on that bookend, those starting and end of the days. Figure out a good routine to do something that's positive when you start your day. And then that's kind of calming and rewarding at the end of the day. Number three is figure out a way to move your body. If you feel good about moving, it doesn't have to be a whole workout, but 10 minutes of shaking your body in between your meetings, or doing jumping jacks or yoga or some type of somatic exercises. Movement is such a great way to move energy through and feelings through the body. So finding a way that feels good with movement, that aligns with you, that doesn't feel like it's hard, that's another one.
Yeah.
Another thing is, figuring out what brings you joy and what brings you gratitude, right? And making a list around that. I always talk about, making an oxytocin list or a dopamine menu. And so as you're going through your life, noticing, wow, the smell of this really brought me joy, or jotting them down somewhere in a notes app so that you can recall them when you need them, because we all
Yeah.
need those moments, right?
Hmm.
Other things might be, practicing grounding tools. So bilateral stimulation, adding some mindfulness or meditation into your life, adding some, just focused awareness to be more in the present. And I think that was five. I'm not sure. If there's not five, gratitude lists can be another one too.
I I love that. This has been amazing, Michelle. I thank you so much for being on the show. I think you shared so much wonderful knowledge and wisdom with our listeners today. Trauma is something that everybody experiences, and not everybody, has the capability of handling everything, the same way as the person next to them. And, it really helps to be able to learn about, how to handle trauma. And when it comes to psychotherapy, I love psychotherapy because, like I said, you go right into the subconscious, things that you're not even aware that are bothering you, that have happened, that you have totally forgotten about, but your body has not forgotten about. And, it's just, the knowledge you shared today and on all the things, the tools, the strategies, everything were fabulous. And I thank you so much for being on the show today. And I thank you for everything. You're just an amazing individual.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be here, Stacey. Thank you so much for having me. And I hope that your listeners have a wonderful holiday season and look forward to connecting with you soon.
Yes, same here. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.